All right, thank you. Thank you all for coming. June 1st is approaching. That's actually the official start date for the hurricane season. Hurricane is actually just one of the natural disasters we prepare for. There are a lot of natural and man-made disasters. In the current era, actually, we are more worried about man-made disasters than natural disasters. So I think today we're going to go ahead and give you an update on what are current vulnerabilities in the area with our team and what we are focusing on, and hopefully you can also take an opportunity to come up with your own plans with your own family members for the upcoming hurricane season. Before I start, I think Mike's kind enough to let me start and kick off this, but he's the man behind the scene of doing and keeping us all safe, and rightly so. He was named as an outstanding employee by the UT system. Thank you, Mike, for all the hard work. So this is kind of our agenda today. We're going to have our members from National Weather Services to give us 2018 season forecast. Felicia's going to talk about employee preparedness. Lieutenant Ryan will talk about safety and security. Frank will go over business continuity plan. I think most of you have received an updated version and format to fill those for the business continuity plan. Stephen will talk about communications. Hopefully we'll get one way rather than 5 different emails, Steve. Cybersecurity by Louis, and Stop the Bleed program, which was very popular last time. I hope Mr. Campbell has brought in an old tie, so Mike is not able to rip his tie again this time, and then we're going to have a fire preparation and response. All right, I think here are the key points. All staff members must now have documented annual training on their emergency role. I think each time we go through any natural disaster, and I think last year we were able to go through a fire, Hurricane Harvey, and a freeze. So we are fairly seasoned, at least in those 3 areas, based on what we have to go through last year. But I think each time we go through this, we have a debriefing, and we go through the areas of improvement. So I think we want to make sure that everybody should understand their role and document their role, what their role is during this emergency event. This briefing is part of that effort. The annual acknowledgement process with your manager is the primary mechanism for this, and please do start this process now. This will be supplemented with specific training and exercise for designated staff members. We do run those on a regular basis under Mike's leadership. Cybersecurity is a growing risk that we must all help to prevent, and it's actually a major issue from CMS and Joint Commission. People can hack onto your pacemakers. So there are a lot of things that are going on worldwide that we have to be careful about when we are in a health system, that how we want to make sure we protect our patient in terms of these cybersecurity and cyber threats. Remember, this is all hazards preparedness. This is not just for hurricane season. All right, what's new this year? Detailed risk assessment on chemical risk. Just last week, we actually had a fire in Texas City. We were all ready and prepared. Again, thanks to Mike. He was actually provided us a list of all the chemicals in our surrounding area. So we as a health system are ready to take care of these patients in an event. Luckily, everything went well. There was no casualty. But it reminds us that we have to be ready and prepare for those kind of events. Regulatory requirements, business continuity plan, delegation of authority, and succession planning. I think that's one of the things in the new document that actually I've seen, that we have to make sure who is going to ride that event and who is going to be coming in to take after that event is over. Integrated emergency management program for all UTMB locations. Now we are more of a system. We can't think just of Galveston campus. We have League City, we have Angleton, we have TDCJ, we have over 90 clinic locations throughout Texas. So we have to make sure that we have plan for all places, not just the island alone. Additional of nuclear radiological incidents to hazards vulnerability, that's also new for us to make sure we understand that and have plans for that. An emergency communication plan we actually put in after the fire, UTMB ham radio, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that. All right, in summary of roles in an emergency, so main thing, as you all know, there is an incident command, and it's often run by President Callender or his designee. Leads all aspects of operations and response, authorize any closure of schools or offices. So all the members of the team actually give input, and the incident commander actually makes the decision. So you have to wait for what the decision comes out of command center as a final decision. Supervisors and faculty advisors follow lead of incident command to inform employees, student of emergency prep duties, timing of any authorized closures. I think we have noticed in our last event that folks try to make decisions on their own at each individual area, so I think we encourage everybody. We try to increase communication, and I think Steve's team has done an excellent job that we did send communication twice a day after the command center meeting to what the final decision was from the command center. So we encourage you to look forward to those points. If it's an emergency, we have to send more frequent alerts, we will do that, but try to wait until we can get all the information to make the final decisions. Employees and students, again, follow lead of incident command. The bottom line is the information that needs to be disseminated needs to come from the incident command center. So I think with that, those were just key points from my end, and now we're going to go ahead and start with Lance Wood, who is going to give us some good news or overview of what the weather is looking for next year. Thank you, Lance, for coming.
Well, thanks, Mike, for inviting me, and thanks, Dr. Sharma. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about the 2018 hurricane outlook and what we know here in April. One thing I always like to remind people when we're talking about the outlook for the upcoming season, whether or not we see a bunch of tropical cyclones like we saw last year or just a few, it only takes one, especially if it impacts you. So we want to remind everybody to prepare every year, and of course this time of year is a good time to think about your hurricane plan. This particular image is actually from Tropical Storm Cindy. A lot of people forgot about Cindy, but this is some wave action that impacted Bolivar there at Rollover Pass. So we did have some significant wave action and elevated water levels. Of course, Harvey coming later in the season, closer to the peak of the season. And I want to remind everybody, but this time last year, we were talking about a below normal April forecast. So a lot can change in the forecasting world between April and June, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So our luck ran out last year as far as the United States and Puerto Rico. We had not had a major hurricane make landfall since Wilma. You have to go all the way back to 2005. So it had been about 12 years. And then we had Harvey, Irma, and Maria. And I'm sure you all are well aware of that. That is 3 Category 4 hurricanes making landfall. And you see some of our new satellite image from our new satellite, GOES-16, where you can see the nighttime imagery there with Harvey, where you can actually see almost like a visible satellite imagery at nighttime with seeing the city lights. So technology has definitely improved with being able to observe at nighttime. And think about what happened in September. So we measure the hurricane season not only in number of storms, but how much energy has actually dissipated. And the 175 units just smashed the previous record, 155 there in September. So incredible September. And remember, Harvey was in August. So the seasonal forecast, we'll jump into it. Dr. Klotzbach is well known for his seasonal outlook. He's one of the only people that attempted in early April. He's from Colorado State. And in red there, you see the number of storms being forecast, 14, which is a little above normal of 12, 7 hurricanes and 3 major hurricanes, and that energy index that I alluded to earlier at 130, which is not anywhere near close to what we saw last year, but it's still above normal. So let's go back and just take a look at the 2017 forecast. So in April, the brown, go ahead and point to it here, the brown numbers, so that's last April 6th, we were looking at 11 named storms in the forecast and only 2 major hurricanes. And then as we went through the season, things became more clear that we were looking at an above normal year. So by the August outlook, it was actually pretty decent. Still ended up with more major hurricanes than forecast. So this 226 is the unit that tells us how much energy. So a lot of long-lived major hurricanes, even offshore. You even had Jose out there and Katia. So it was a pretty incredible season. But stay tuned. The outlook could change here as we approach the season. And to talk about, I know there's a lot on this slide, but I'm going to describe a little bit of the science we're looking at. This up here is the forecast for El Nino, La Nina at the peak of the season. This was back in February. It looked like a fairly low probability of El Nino in red, and most likely looking at a neutral year. And neutral is positive for tropical cyclone activity. This is the peak of our season, August, September, and October. So this area is what we're most concerned about. Take a look at what's been happening, though, here in early April. The El Nino probabilities are climbing a little bit, and it's getting closer to the neutral probabilities. So if this trend continues and the probability for El Nino goes up, we could have to revise our forecast downward. So we're watching that right now. Unfortunately, in April, we don't usually know yet how El Nino is going to play out, but we'll probably know that by early June. And that's why I said, stay tuned on that. And this is one of the reasons why the NOAA seasonal outlook doesn't come out until late May. So stay tuned on that. But right now, if you have to take a shot at it, you'd go with neutral conditions, which would be alluding to slightly above normal activity. Thank you. And I believe Felicia is up next.
Good afternoon. I'm Felicia Evans with Human Resources. And as you heard earlier, Dr. Sharma mentioned that this past year we experienced a variety of emergencies. And so we typically categorize our emergencies into 2 types of events. A notice event, which, as you probably understand, that's an event that allows us to do some planning and preparation in advance of that actual event affecting us as an organization. So this is where we would categorize hurricanes and other forecasted weather-related occurrences. We also have to plan for, to the extent that we can, no-notice incidents, which are those that are pretty much spontaneous and unplanned, so things like utility interruptions, fires, or mass casualty situations. So how do we staff during these events? We have 2 categories of employees that we use for staffing during these events: essential employees and non-essential employees. During a notice incident, essential employees are those employees that are required to perform work on site or at an alternate work location, either before, during, or after a declared emergency. And that work may look a little different than what they're usually accustomed to doing. We could ask them to come in on days that they would not normally be working, or a shift that they may not normally work. They may have an assignment that's outside of the scope of their normal job duties. Certainly it would be something that they're qualified and competent to do, but it may not be the work that they come in and perform on a regular basis. We might also ask those people to serve as our relief, so that when individuals who've perhaps ridden out an emergency situation are able to go home and get some respite from the work that they've done on site or at an alternate work location. During notice events, our non-essential employees are not required to be on site to perform work, but they are not able to leave until they're released by their supervisor, and they must return to work as conditions permit. Now, that's not to say that a non-essential employee would not be asked to do something from the location, perhaps that they've evacuated to, or if they're in a location that makes driving conditions unsafe for them. So again, it's a matter of work assignments can be adjusted during the course of an event depending on what's going on at the time. Now, if there's a no-notice event, such as the fire that we had last January, all employees will be considered essential until they're explicitly released by their supervisor. So in situations like that, where a situation is evolving rapidly and changing, we may need individuals to stay and perform work for us, although they may have previously been designated as non-essential. So, I mean, it's important to remember, and you'll see this as a running theme as I talk, that an employee's classification and their work assignment may change depending on the nature of the situation. So in terms of what employees should be doing right now in advance of what most would consider our peak time for emergencies, is you want to make sure that you have completed the online emergency classification and acknowledgement form and review that with your supervisor by May 31st. Last year we rolled out an online form, and it is required now that the form be completed online. We no longer have a paper version of this form, and we're asking that that be done by May 31st. And this is really important for us to be able to plan and know what our staffing resources potentially are in the event of an emergency. As was also mentioned earlier by Dr. Sharma, this also helps us to document our compliance with regulatory requirements. So this is something that's expected of all employees and their managers to complete by May 31st. Certainly, we need to be able to get in touch with individuals, so we need for your personal information to be updated, as well as that of your emergency contact, because at times, you may be impacted personally by the emergency, and we need to know how to contact someone to support you. So we need to make sure that both of those types of information are up to date at all times. As already been mentioned, you need to know your role and to whom you'll report during a particular emergency. That's a little easier to know during a notice event, but during those no-notice incidents, you definitely want to be taking direction from your supervisor and incident command. Individuals who are deemed essential should go ahead and make sure that they have the badge hang tag and the parking placards that allow you entry onto the premises during an emergency. You definitely want to make plans for any personal obligations that you have, families, pets, your housing, to make sure that those things are squared away before you are actually required to be here on the premises. And while this next one may seem like, why is she even talking about this? Direct deposit is pretty important in the event that banks are not accessible. The mail is not able to operate and deliver paper checks. We have a small percentage of employees who do still receive paper checks, and so we will not deliver checks. We will not deliver cash. So, certainly you want to have access to monetary funds in the event of an emergency. And the same would apply for medical records. In the middle of an emergency, you want to have access to those things, so we encourage you to enroll in MyChart. So at the time of an emergency, what is it that we expect employees to do? Certainly you're going to need to monitor any communications before, during, and after the emergency, and Steve will talk more about what those communication mechanisms are. You're going to follow instructions from your supervisor and incident command, and then you're going to remain at work until released. In terms of how you will be compensated during an emergency, non-exempt essential employees will be paid for any hours worked and any hours that they are required to remain on site, and that includes sleep time. And so if that results in overtime, then we would pay you the applicable overtime for that. Exempt essential employees, those who are not subject to overtime, will get their regular salary, and they may receive a lump sum payment at the end of the emergency. And that amount will be determined at the beginning of the emergency based on the expected severity and duration of the emergency situation. Non-essential employees will receive up to 40 hours of administrative leave if that's approved by incident command. It's not our practice to give compensatory time and follow up to an emergency, and the maximum number of hours, as I mentioned, is 40 hours, although there is an opportunity in extreme circumstances for Dr. Callender to grant more administrative leave. And then finally, if employees are unable to return after that 40 hours of administrative leave, then they would have the ability to use their personal leave accruals or go on leave without pay status until they are able to return. These are a variety of resources that can assist with getting prepared for an emergency. Our HR emergency planning website is where you will find the online employee acknowledgement and classification form and other information that's helpful in terms of an adverse events toolkit to plan for any type of emergency that could impact business operations. Okay, and I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Irwin.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Lieutenant Ryan Irwin. I am the watch commander for all 3 campuses. Just want to go over a couple of things as far as the badge requirements. Like we've already discussed, if just getting the ball rolling, getting things going, go ahead and get if you're an E employee, just obtain the orange card and the placard. What we have is UTMB police officers are going to be stationed at the checkpoints if you're going to be coming back in to the island. If we get these done, we request that both the card and the placard are displayed. Every event that we have, someone will say, well, I'm on the list that should have gotten the placard. We don't have any additional list. Whoever comes in is going to have the placard and the card. The WEAR campaign, display with your UTMB ID badge at all times. If you put the placard on the dashboard, that way we can allow into the garages what we do. A lot of the times we'll raise the gate arms at the garages as well. Display it at all times. We have UTMB policy stating you need to display your UTMB ID badge at all times, just so we can identify who is supposed to be here, who is not. Remove all personal valuables from offices after we have an emergency. We'll have cleanup teams, we'll have different crews coming in. Please get these personal valuables from your offices ahead of time, so that way we don't have a lot of theft incidents that we have to deal with. Conduct an inventory of your office items before you leave and return. Report missing items or suspicious activity immediately. We say, if you see something, say something. Let us know if there's anything that seems suspicious. With these type of issues, we have a lot of people trying to get onto the island. That's why we regulate who is actually on the island and then actually who is on campus. As far as the suspicious activity notifications, our emergency number is the 772-1111, and the non-emergency is the 772-2691. And then also, lastly, await instructions from leadership before discarding. The majority of these items that we're talking about are state property, so we need to know what is going to be discarded, what areas, and that is it. Thank you all.
Thank you very much to the police department, to HR and all the other areas. We're talking business continuity now. And I'm tempted, I'm going to go for it. James Bond, Fire and Ice. UTMB had it all. Fire, ice, cyber attacks, and this little thing called Hurricane Harvey. And we made it through it. And I really want to thank everybody at UTMB who demonstrated through all these attacks, whether man-made or by Mother Nature, to continue our mission. And that's really, in all of our mission areas, what was thrown at it, we threw it right back in terms of continuing healthcare services to all the communities, to take care of our students in the education area, and the institutional support to hold it all together. So kudos to everybody really for planning for it and then executing on it in a disaster. So cyber threats were mentioned. They've been added to the institutional risk along with the weather, utilities outages, disease outbreaks, mass casualties, and fire. It's not going to go away. It's something that we're under attack on, and we're going to hear a little bit more about the protective measures that were taken as an institution and as individual users in this kind of environment shortly by Louis. General strategies for the mission areas to continue emergency protective measures, compressed course schedules, contingency use of alternate space in the education realm, on the research, emergency protective measures, taking care of our animals, emergency supplies on hand, and making dry ice and other available to execute on those plans. We are multi-campus. We're having a lot of clinics across Texas. So we have an opportunity to respond in a flexible way in emergencies. So we may have to relocate and respond quickly depending on the threats that we're exposed to. Institutional support. Again, key functions, alternate space, can really, here technology in many instances is an asset for us that we can leverage by working from remote location, just as if we were in our office environment. We can exercise those plans every week as we have team members working remotely and perform the critical functions, take advantage of those wherever that's a possibility and an option. So I'm the NAGA-in-Chief, so many of you have already received a request to get the updates into the departmental plans. I really appreciate that everybody is nice to me and not giving me a hard time. And all departmental plans were updated last year, and we're not going to do any different this year. I'm not going to give up in terms of staying on top of that until they're all in, so I appreciate everybody's efforts. Loop your team members in. Don't make it just an effort of leadership or the person designated to work with leadership on updating the departmental plans, but take the input from everyone. We've learned so much. Again, fire, ice, cyber, and hurricanes. A lot of opportunities to exercise plans, to make them more perfect, adapt and make them part of best practices moving forward. Take that input and incorporate it in the plans. As mentioned before, a new element in the departmental plans is the succession and delegation of authority. So a new section has been added. I'm going to push back on plans that I receive if that's not included, so be aware that that's a requirement. Know your role as an individual team member, know the downtime procedures if resources that you ordinarily rely on are unavailable. And prepare every team member that he or she may be asked what's the expectation the institution has during an emergency for business continuity. I think 2 talking points, it's like describe what role the individual has played in the disasters that we've faced over the last year, and remind them that our mission must continue even if we're threatened. And at this, I'm going to turn it over. Additional information available online, and please contact me if you have any questions or concerns. Turn it over to Steve.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Campbell with our marketing and communications team. We've heard lots about communications, and we do know that during all types of notice and non-notice events, there are multiple layers of communications that you, as managers, supervisors, employees, and staff and students will actually receive. All levels of that communication is really vitally important. So I kind of think of it as layers, and that we have information that will come out from incident command that will go out to the full university. And then we also have, depending upon what your particular role is and what your particular job is as well, communications specifically to students from faculty advisors, from your supervisors and managers to the staff, as well as UTMB overall for actually patients that would be coming here for care or for appointments. We will use, you can see the picture here, we will use a wide variety of the tools that we have available. And you can see really all of those listed as well. I think one of those things that we know is that people use a variety of different types of communications during emergencies. And so we will use all of these that are available. The broader communications that will come out of Incident Command will primarily be able to talk about the kind of situation updates, so really overall what's going on, instructions as far as stay, go, or return, and then also providing any additional helpful information or other places that you can go to as well. That is really meant to complement, and I challenge everybody to be very much in touch within your own area. Know how to communicate with your teams, know how to communicate with your supervisors, because that's where the calls are likely to be made based upon what is particularly needed for that, for this particular incident. Typically before, we will use a mix of these depending upon what the individual circumstances, the individual emergency is. Typically is we will do an overall global email broadcast and use UTMB alerts usually at the start. If it's called for routine communications, it actually ends up going out from there. And then once we end up having the incident wrapped up, we will also be notifying that too. One thing I do want to talk about, everybody has heard about UTMB alerts, and has everybody know what Everbridge is? You've all heard about Everbridge. Everbridge is the tool that the university uses to communicate by text and mobile. And I really encourage, I'm going to walk you through a couple of steps. I'm really going to encourage you to leave today and encourage all of your teams to sign up and make sure that information is the most up to date. Just about everybody has a cell phone on them. Just about everybody never does anything without that cell phone. And text, when communications are a challenge, are also pretty reliable way to continue to be able to get information out. So we really do encourage everybody to go into the system and update your information. One thing for all employees and students, that information is automatically entered into the system for your work email, university-owned email, and any desk phone number that you have. However, any personal information and contact information as well, you need to actually go into the system to do it. It's really very simple to do. If you end up going to the directory, so you go to the directory, you search for yourself, select yourself, and then you'll have these options that actually end up coming up. You click the middle button that says edit my alert information. That will take you to a logon screen, and you just put in your normal credentials that you use to log on. And then it will take you to actually your profile, as well as my information as well. You're going to edit, hit the edit button on that top right-hand corner, and that's going to end up bringing up the information and where you can input that. You'll see the order is set up: text, mobile, UTMB email, phone, other email, home phone, and a variety of other options. Again, when communications can be down because of a variety of different emergencies, text are continue to be very reliable, and so we always recommend for you to use that and have that top on the list overall. You put in that information, hit save, and it's there. Great. Let me hear a little bit more about cyber threats.
Good afternoon. My name is Louis Perrin with the Office of Information Security, and we've seen where cyber threats are becoming a little bit more of an issue these days. And there's a couple of things that have changed and a couple of things that haven't changed in recent history. The things that haven't changed is the bad guys are still after us. They're after the information that we maintain. They're after the information that we try to protect. The other thing that hasn't changed much is that the preventive mechanisms that we can employ to prevent them from getting there, 90% of them are very common sense. They're the things that we're doing all of the time, or at least that we hope we're trying to get out there through security awareness and making available to y'all as far as all the time type things to do. Things like keeping your software up to date, keeping antivirus software on your computer, so on and so forth. Being aware of phishing campaigns, being aware of what's going on in the environment around you as it regards to security. The one thing that has changed, however, is awareness. A lot more people, a lot more entities are starting to ask, how are y'all doing? What are you doing in terms of information security and protection? And the other thing that's changing, and it goes kind of hand in hand with that awareness, is the reporting. So what I'm going to do is give y'all just a little bit of a report on information that we've covered, I think, for each of the last 3 times that I've been up here for this presentation. And we'll get to see a little bit closer to how we're doing. This is a little bit of a report card. Some of the things that we have to routinely track and report on are computer viruses, infected systems, spam, everyone's favorite email, results of phishing campaigns, account compromises, and lost or stolen information resources. The review that we're going to be doing here is going to be looking at FY 2017 versus the first 7 months now of 2018. Infected systems, always going to be out there. There's not going to be a whole lot that we can do about it due to zero-day viruses. The hackers are always out there trying to get in. But what we can see is that in terms of total numbers, we're down about 30%. And the biggest part that we can attribute that to is improved endpoint protection. That means basically more machines have antivirus, more machines are actually doing their updates. There's a particular type of virus that was becoming very prevalent in the area last year called CryptoLocker. It's a real problem in that it not only destroys data, but it also extorts money. And last year we had 12 incidences of CryptoLocker. So far this year we haven't had any. So that's a definite improvement. Spam, everyone's favorite email, right? We block on average right now about 5 million spam emails per month. That's averaging about 394 per person, per user. Now, if, depending upon who you are and what you get, like for myself, that's a fairly low number. I get a little bit more than that, and thank heavens for that blocking. And that's up significantly. That's up by about 1.1 million per month. And again, we've made some improvements in our spam filters. We have more and improvements to those filtering. We're also doing a lot more user training and user awareness into what's going on with spam, what is spam, how come it's potentially bad for us. If you're wasting your time reading a lot of these emails, it's a problem. If the emails look like spam and what they actually are is phishing attempts, and we'll get into that in just a second, then it can potentially be even worse. Account compromises. More often than not, an account compromise occurs because you've received an email. That's called a phish or phishing. Okay, and basically it's an attempt to trick you into giving your credentials. You fall for that attack, and basically your account becomes, or the hacker becomes the owner of your account, and then they can turn right around and use that to either phish other people or to use it for more malicious attempts. Compromised accounts last year, particularly in our student population, were quite high. You see there 316. So far, year to date, it's been 12. There are a couple of technical reasons for that. Moving our student community over to the Office 365 platform, which offers some more in-depth controls in terms of how we can avoid things, has been a big deal. And then, of course, improved campaign awareness, improved awareness from y'all as far as what a phish is. Lost, stolen resources, these are going to stay about the same. We're running about on average. We can't help the thieves that are willing to break into your car, break into your house. We can't help the people that are going to leave their iPhones sitting on their desk or set them down on a table someplace and walk away from them. These things happen. We are getting better. There is better awareness, but it happens. And one of the other things that I was asked to talk about this time, and I've got just a brief minute to do it, was what's going on out in the wild, separate from UTMB. Well, these are things that are going to be impacting our employee community, particularly if they have to deal with them in a real-world environment. They're not going to be able to be as productive here at UTMB. They're not going to be available all of the time, and I wanted to cover just a few of them real quick. These are current active scams that are going on out in the market. The IRS tax scam. Sounds like a neat idea, but somebody is actually going to file your income taxes for you. And they're not hacking you, they're hacking the tax preparer. And then whenever that refund comes in, they're going to call you up, or somebody that sounds like they're from the IRS is going to call you up and say, hey, that money was fraudulently deposited into your account. Could you please make arrangements to return it? We'll make it easy for you. We'll let you give us your credit card number. We'll let you send us a bank check, or you can even do it through prepaid credit card. Trust me, guys, the IRS doesn't work that way. But the bad news is the hacker does have all that information to be able to file that fraudulent credit card or that fraudulent income tax refund for you. The I Know What You Did scam. This is one that's been hitting in Dickinson here recently, okay? Basically, they're going out and they're pulling all of your social media information. They're taking a look at it. They're sending you a slow mail or a snail mail email, or not an email, but just a regular letter that says, oh, by the way, I know what you did. They're very non-specific. They're not saying what it is you did, but we're going to tell everybody what you did unless you pay us $8,750, which coincidentally was about the amount of what a Bitcoin was worth whenever this scam started. Obviously, the problem there is your own loss of reputation, embarrassment, and if you actually paid it, there would be some financial loss as well. Harvey Relief contractor scam. This has happened over 1,200 times in and around the Houston area recently, including 300 times in Dickinson. The fraudulent contractors will put forth very real-looking bids and prepare very authentic-looking contract and work orders. Apparently, they're aware that most of their victims have either received FEMA money or insurance money to pay for it. They're not asking for any money to book the services, but they are letting them know in advance, whenever we get ready to do the work, we are going to need the money up front. And then they're showing up with a crew of people, they're showing up with a truck loaded down with equipment and say, okay, we're ready to start, pay us, and as soon as they get the money, they're leaving. And of course, tugging at everyone's heartstrings, the no-kill shelter scam. This one is still going on, active as well. That starts out as an email or a social media post regarding the lack of or overcrowded no-kill shelters, usually due to a natural disaster like Harvey. They're requesting donations to be made to a GoFundMe-style website. It's a fake site. Don't fall for it. They almost always ask for more information than what they need to actually collect that. And personal information is collected, it's exploited, and there's financial loss. And again, these are all active, but they're not the only ones going on. So you need to be vigilant, you need to be prepared for it, you need to see them for what they are, and hopefully don't fall for them, don't take the bait. Stop the bleed.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Higgs. I'm one of the clinical educators at League City campus. And so I've partnered with trauma services here on campus. We're trying to initiate and roll out Stop the Bleed within the community. Just some background. So, you know, nowadays, if someone's having a heart attack or something's going on, everyone knows to call 911 and get an AED. We've kind of got it drilled into the public. Well, now with recent events, you know, all the tragedies in the news, I feel like I'm talking too loud. We're trying to initiate Stop the Bleeds, trying to tailor to that. And we're trying to get out tourniquets and Stop the Bleed kits to schools, anywhere that has AED and public access. So in the event of a, you know, shooting, mass casualty, think about everything in the news lately, people will run to these AEDs and be able to get the Stop the Bleed kits, because the statistics show that about 30% of our trauma patients bleed out. So if we can stop the bleed, that will hopefully help improve the outcomes for the patients. Also, with recent events, like you think about the Las Vegas shooting, about 80% of the patients arrived to the hospitals by private auto, meaning people just grabbed and go. They had no medical, emergency services were overwhelmed. And on top of that, the other stat is that about, from 20 to 2015, 140 active shootings have occurred in the United States. So they're only going up. So we're trying to get prepared. So Mike has brought this really cool dummy for me to demonstrate how to apply tourniquets, how to plug the bullet holes, how to do all that. So this is a lovely mannequin. And then a lot of the Stop the Bleed kits, they have these combat gauze, as we're learning from our military. And so there's, a hole right here. We'll have gloves in these kits. And so what you'll do is basically just tear the kit. Just like anything that's leaking, you just want to stop the leak. So you're going to plug the hole to try to, and I would have gloves on, of course. Sorry, I don't think Mike's supplied with gloves. But you can feel a bone all the way down in there. And so the idea is to just get this gauze tucked in here to stop the bleeding. And that will hopefully help save this person's life if they were in an active shooting event. And then also, let's see, there's another big one. Like, look how real this is. This is like the real deal. You can feel it out in there. So you wouldn't have to necessarily, like non-clinical, have to assess. You're just trying to put direct pressure on the site and make it stop bleeding. It's a very simple process. They also have these lovely tourniquets. So let's say that something's on an extremity and it's, having problems. Erwin, this is where I was going to call you up here, because we're trying to get these out too as well. They're pretty fancy tourniquets. Idea is really simple. So let's say he's bleeding out of his arm here and we're trying to save his arm. We don't want him to lose it. We would put this around. It's Velcro. And you would want it pretty snug. I mean, you don't want to make the whole arm purple or blue, but you would want to. And then you could just simply twist this till you stop seeing the blood coming out. Am I hurting you yet? Tap out. Tap out. And so it's getting too tight. And then you would clip it up in there. If it's not, Erwin's got some muscles here. It's not clipping. And then it hopefully will get the patient to the hospital and get them treated. So all of these kits, UTMB is lucky because Diana is partnered with the RAC, and they have bought, I don't know how many boxes of Stop the Bleed kits. So we're trying to get out to the communities. We've contacted the local school districts. We're trying to get into all the ISDs in our communities to try to help. They're already doing drills on intruder drills, so now we're trying to do the back half part and talk about what happens when it does happen, or if it does happen, what to do next to try to save some lives. So, if you have any questions, anybody want to play with the demo?
Just want to say that that kit is available to anybody that needs to use it.
Right.
And, can you talk about any training that's available here?
The training that's available. So this is like my, Trauma Services likes to do injury prevention goals. So we've partnered with some of the local EMSs, and we're going to do some training with, I think, Texas City PD. Diana and I have contacted, like I said, we were trained as trainers at the local RAC. It's very simple training. There's a website that gives you lots of information. I can give you my contact information or Diana's. I'm happy to go out. I think we're going to Stafford in May. I've reached out to Friendswood ISD, Santa Fe, Texas City has told us they want us to come. So I'm trying to get Galveston with another Ed Smith and I. So we're just trying to get out into the community and get all these kits that are available. It's all on a grant fund, so it's not at any cost. And the training is really, it only takes about 10 to 15 minutes. So it's just the principle and knowing where they need to go. So hopefully the goal is to have a Stop the Bleed kit with every AED around the country. That's what we're trying to get to. So.
Hi, I'm Chuck Carlisle, and this is my team. They're going to demonstrate. It's Brent, Jennifer, Todd, Corey, and our newest member, Mario Soares. All right, so a bit of an update from last year's fire and where we're at now. Just about all of the after-action items that we identified from what happened with the fire have been completed. Additionally, we've changed some ways that we do communications on those early hours or early minutes of a fire. As you might recall, it only took us 27 minutes to completely evacuate the Johnson Lee Hospital when we had that fire. So that's a pretty rapid time span. What they're demonstrating now is called a SCED, affectionately called a human taco, as you'll soon find out. They seem to be really popular. They actually work pretty good during the course of the fire. We've been conducting some different drills this year, kind of modified them, and expanded them. And we want to demonstrate this and show just what's capable for you. We don't have these in every, I got to warn you, we don't have this in every department. We've identified specific departments within the hospital for particularly non-ambulatory patients and the critical care areas and places that specifically requested them. And we still have a few more in case you are particularly in need. We've also been conducting vertical evacuation training with Mr. Sparks over there, out there in your department, if you have these located and if you'd like to see how that works. We have also included, we've also installed these DVR radio boosters, signal boosters in the towers. Pretty convenient, huh? Pretty quick. You can wrap somebody up and truck them on out. That comes from Confined Space Rescue, but it seemed to work really good. And getting people downstairs, it's got handles to help you slide them down there or carry them down really smoothly. We have installed some radio signal boosters throughout the tower, so now there's not a problem with Galveston Fire Department talking to each other or to other first responders. And that's actually a brand new technology, the first time it's ever been used in the Houston-Galveston area. And so we've gone through a few pains, but we've perfected that, tested it, and it does in fact work. We've also, you might have noticed the Galveston Fire Department out here in front of Jenny Seeley Hospital. We conducted some communication exercises kind of to improve our response with them and give them some ideas what to expect when they show up at the hospital, and they give us an idea of what they need. You will also be seeing them around June. We're going to do a little larger scale exercise where we're actually going to evacuate people out, some volunteers, and kind of fine-tune that that cooperation between us and Galveston Fire Department. And it's actually worked out really well. A lot of good things learned, a lot of good communication. Additionally, we've expanded our OR fire response plans where we actually, or training, where we actually go out and help the ORs walk through a mock evacuation of patients. We've hit all of our major operating rooms from Jenny Seeley, League City, and Angleton Danbury. How do you prepare? Make sure you have your department's fire response plan, the written one for you. If you need any help, contact our office. We can get you one. A template, that is. We can help work you through that. There are three major ways to respond to a fire alarm. You treat all alarms like they're the real thing. No distinction. We don't generally tell you whether it's a drill or not. In fact, Joint Commission doesn't allow us to let you know if it's a drill on the required ones. We may do some more concentrated drills and preparation above and beyond that will involve some planning, but that's for more advanced purposes. But clear the corridors. Get out in the corridor, make sure it's clear, get ready to go. That also makes sure if you see smoke, you might need to make a decision right away. Close all the doors in the corridor, and patient room doors. Those doors help. To my point, if you'll see, this is 10 feet from the John Seeley Hospital fire. Notice the difference in the burned out elevator lobby and the pristine wall and ceiling just outside that lobby. And that's because those fire doors closed when smoke detectors went off. The doors automatically closed. Sometimes you see that in the hospital after an alarm. And that's the purpose, and that's what you see technology working at its best. And that made a big difference into the level of damage that could have been in the hospital. And that's why we closed doors. Report to the rally point or your alarm area leader, which is usually a charge nurse, and you wait for further instructions. Unless you know it's time to go and it's obvious, then you leave. High rises like medical research building or other research areas that are not, or business areas that are not healthcare, you do a staged evacuation, you go to the nearest stairwell, you wait for instructions, again, unless it's obvious you need to leave. Because the reason we do that is so we don't have injuries going downstairs of a large high-rise. That's a lot of stairs, and that's a consistent response across the nation. And so that's not unusual if you think that is kind of strange. Other buildings, like smaller business buildings, you just evacuate, kind of like high school, junior high. You just truck on out. Again, if you need any help with fire plans, give us a call at Fire and Life Safety. Give us an email. I'm under Charles Carlisle in the directory. And I believe that's it.
Go ahead. I think the key is to make sure that you share this video with all your colleagues in your area and make sure you follow the instructions and prepare your business continuity plan. And thank you for all you guys do.
Okay, thank you, everybody.